Really delighted to have back with us Lowell Ponte. We've had him on before, and boy, people really enjoy what he has to say. Former editor of Reader's Digest magazine. He's the co-author of some really incredible books. The Inflation Deception, 6 Ways Government Tricks Us, 7 Ways to Stop It, and Crashing the Dollar and How to Survive a Global Currency Collapse. And interesting to have him on today because we're talking about something that we all kind of shake our head over. Today, or this week, is the 100th anniversary of the income tax. And is it legal? I don't know. Lowell, nice to have you, friend. How are you doing?
Hey, wonderful to be with you. In fact, the theme we're talking about today is our new book, The Great Debasement.
Oh, The Great Debasement. Okay.
Yeah, in fact, the subtitle is The 100th Year Dying of the Dollar and How to Get America's Money Back. That dying began in 1913 when the newly elected progressive government of the United States under Woodrow Wilson enacted the 16th Amendment, which immediately opened the door to the income tax. That's what we're marking this week. Oh, and they created the Federal Reserve, whose purpose was to get rid of this nasty old solid gold money based on the biblical standard of money that the founders put into the Constitution and put in its place an elastic currency. In fact, that's the very word used in the legislation enabling the Fed, that it was to furnish an elastic currency. Yes, the founders, when they wrote the Constitution, put in language to prohibit an income tax, a capitation tax that fell on individuals. For the first more than 100 years of our country's history, we were funded by tariffs, by imposts, and so on. Oh, except during the war between the states, when Abraham Lincoln imposed the first income tax. But that was done as a wartime measure to fund the government. Politicians have always wanted an income tax for the same reason that, for example, local politicians love the idea of a tax on hotel rooms.
Right.
Because they're stayed in by people who won't be there on election day to vote against them. And so with an income tax, you can impose a heavy tax on a minority of people. So you never have to worry about offending a majority.
Wow.
And that's why they love it. And so today we have a heavier and heavier tax that falls on fewer and fewer people. We have half the population that pays no income tax at all now.
Can we survive this, Lowell? I mean, now they're looking for more taxes. They're saying, well, we're going to go after the higher income people. But at the end of the day, when the dust settled, we all saw it go up here a couple of weeks ago because of the so-called fiscal cliff. How much longer can we survive this before there's some kind of a major collapse?
Well, there are at least 2 problems with an income tax. Number one, we hear progressives talk about how we need equality. Well, the founders wrote equality into the Constitution. It was equality before the law, meaning that the government was supposed to treat all people alike. An income tax obviously doesn't do that. An income tax says you may have to pay 50% of your income in taxes. Your next door neighbor pays nothing. That isn't exactly equal. And of course, when you have that kind of inequality, it is nowadays used to take from those who have earned a great deal in order to give to people who have earned little or nothing. So you literally have a massive transfer going on. In fact, 2/3 of every tax dollar is now spent on transfer payments, not defense or anything else constitutional under Article 1, Section 8, the enumerated power. Just transferring wealth from your pocket to somebody else's pocket. And when you do that, transferring from the productive to the unproductive, just in practical terms, you have a society committing suicide. You're bleeding the capital out of capitalism. And when capitalism goes, socialism may be a wonderful system for redistributing the wealth, but it's a horrible system for producing wealth because it gives people no incentive.
All right. So how can we, well, first of all, there was talk about potentially going back to a gold standard. I mean, was that just hyperbole? I mean, could it happen?
Ronald Reagan had a gold commission. Several of the Republican candidates, including in the end Mitt Romney and the Republican platform, agreed they would set up a commission to look toward going back to a gold standard, which, as we said, is the biblical standard of money. There were only 4 things defined as money in the Bible: land, cattle, silver, and gold. The reason for that is value was supposed to be based on something hard and tangible. What we had when the progressives, not by accident, combined the Federal Reserve and the income tax was to set up a system in which the government could just print all the money it wanted out of thin air The politicians don't even really need to tax you except to take back enough money to keep the paper funny money they're printing from becoming worthless. So they put out lots of money to the poor that they've conjured out of thin air. This is what the Fed does. And then they tax heavily enough to pull it back so that the value doesn't just disintegrate overnight in inflation. Oh, by the way, we explain all this in our new book I mentioned, The Great Debasement. We would be happy to give 1,000 of your viewers and listeners a copy absolutely free of this book. Okay. And when I say free, I mean we'll pay for the book, which is $19.95 at the bookstore. We'll pay for the postage. We'll even pay for the phone call to get it free. We're just trying to re-empower people.
All right. How do they get that, Lowell?
You get that by calling a toll-free number, 800-630-1494. That's 800-630-1494. It's a little like Columbus, but it isn't quite 1492. It's 800-630-1494. My co-author, Craig Smith, very wealthy guy. He'd retired young, and then he looked around and said, the country is going to hell in a handbasket for my children and grandchildren. We have to do something to try to restore the republic, get back to sound money. And so we're doing a series of books just to empower people, to put the power in your hands, and of course to give you a survival guide, because there are things you can do to escape from all the games they play now to rob you and tax you.
Well, thank you for making that available. And again, we'll give that number out here in just a few moments. So that's Lowell's gift to you. Yeah. Lowell, do you think there'll ever be a proposal to change the tax system? I mean, a flat tax or some other means of taxation?
I would hope so, because if anyone wanted to Google right now the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx, what you'll discover is Marx and Engels had 10 ways to destroy capitalism. And one of the most prominent of them was create a steeply graduated income tax that could disproportionately tax the rich and basically just kill them. And that, unfortunately, is what we increasingly have in the United States. We have a Marxian tax, and as the publisher of our book, David Bradshaw, so brilliantly says, Karl Marx was not one of America's founding fathers. But you'd never know that by the way the government is governing today.
Wow. All right. So what are some of the tips that you could give people that are in your book to survive this nonsense?
Well, as in the biblical standard of values, you need to get away from things they can print on a printing press in Washington, D.C. That means treasuries are not safe. Certainly dollars are not safe. The dollar bill is now like holding stock in an already bankrupt company. Right. I mean, more money now than we'll ever be able to pay off. So it's only a question of when will they declare bankruptcy and monetize the debt, just print $100 trillion to pay things off or more. And therefore, get into things that are tangible. Tangible could mean antiques. Tangible could mean survival food. Tangible could mean guns and bullets, which have been a tremendous investment in recent years. Tangible, of course, could mean the biblical standard of gold and silver that the founders wrote into the Constitution. And that's why they needed a 16th Amendment, the 100th anniversary of which is this week, to be able to get away from those restrictions that the founders had put on, the handcuffs that the founders had put on our corrupt politicians. And in the last 100 years that politicians haven't been constrained, the value of your dollar has gone from 100 cents of purchasing power to today about 1.5 cents. Less than 2 pennies of the purchasing power of a $1912.
Wow. More and more so-called conservatives are now leaning over to the left and saying, all right, yeah, we need to increase revenue, which is a fancy way of saying more taxes. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, and don't forget, they call it investment, too. The problem is the government's idea of investment is whatever benefits the politicians. And what is good politics is often terrible economics and vice versa. I mean, what politicians want is more power for themselves. What sensible economics want is for power and wealth to flow to those who are most productive, who are serving the people in our great ongoing economic democracy, the democracy where people vote with their dollars every day on what products they want and don't want. And that determines the flow of value. The politicians want to basically undo that and have all money flow to Washington, D.C., where, by the way, around Washington, D.C., we now have, 7 of the 10 most prosperous counties in the United States.
Right, Boomtown. They're calling it Boomtown now.
Yeah, well, that is a healthy society where all of the money flows to the political center and not to the economic, commercial, or entrepreneurial centers of the country.
On a side note, do you think, I realize Obamacare is now the law, but can it survive itself?
Well, there are still a lot of questions as to how legal it is. It's not going to work very well, but then neither does the British medical system, where they now just openly acknowledge they have death panels. They basically want the elderly to die. In fact, just the other day, one of the deputy prime minister of Japan said that old people have a duty to die now, to make way, and to stop causing the government to spend all this money on their health care. We will get to the point where Britain is now, where they just deny long-term survival care to the elderly, where if you come in at 83 and want a kidney transplant, they're going to have a panel look at you and say, that's not the best investment of taxpayer money. We would rather give it to that illegal alien who just came across the border.
All right. Again, your book for those who want to get it.
The book is The Great Debasement, and if you'd like to get it free, just call this toll-free number. We'll pay the postage. We'll pay for the book, 800-630-1494. That's 800-630-1494.
All right, and that is Lowell's gift to you for those of you listening and watching today, and you can call anytime, 1-800-630-1494, and take advantage of that offer and then write them a kind note back. Lowell, thank you. You're just a real delight to have on. God bless you, my friend. Keep up the good work, and we'll see if we can change one heart at a time.
Yeah, Perry, thank you for being a beacon of light out there.
Thank you, bud. God bless. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.